relationship and family life, balancing the many roles we play. But how does your relationship with money influence your family and relationship dynamics? Well, we live in a time of COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdown in South Africa. And as we all know, this has wreaked havoc for South Africa's macroeconomic landscape. Businesses are beginning to close down, companies are retrenching, and if you're lucky enough to still have a job, you likely have to face the prospect of a potential salary cut. Now, in times like these, where maybe your pocket isn't matching up to what you previously identified with, how has it influenced and changed your relationship dynamics? For those of you in partnerships, does it mean that one of you has to bring in home more bacon than the other? And for someone who might be in an abusive relationship, how then do you alleviate and move away from an abusive environment when you're solely clinging on to the financial benefits that come with having that specific partner? And regardless, outside of relationships, we have children whom we're so used to providing for, and family members who have also grown accustomed to getting some kind of financial support from you. How then do you change those conversations to bring them closer in truly understanding your role within their lives? That, coupled with working from home dynamics, certainly makes it a lot more difficult for individuals to collaborate with their colleagues without the personality and physical touch dynamics that we've grown so used to. It's a tough conversation, but one that hits very close to home for people across the world. So join us as we're about to get honest and be raw in terms of really peeling back at the layers of how we identify with our money, how our money gives us a sense of worth and well-being, and how that translates into how we relate to our loved ones. Pull up your digital chair. The Liberty Blue Table Sessions is about to begin. And for that, we're about to have a phenomenal conversation with individuals who share familiar stories to us, familiar experiences in terms of their entrepreneurial journeys, their financial prowess and insight, and maybe even more details as to how they interact with money on a day-to-day basis. So let's get this conversation started by speaking to them. And someone who's a very familiar face to the spaces that I work in has to be the phenomenal Samke Mhlongo, a well-known wellness coach and financial coach who often shares insight as to how best to navigate one's financial story. Samke, I'm looking forward to the conversations that we're going to engage in today, but most importantly, allow us to get a little bit of a deeper understanding as to who you are and what you're about, and when last that you felt that someone was truly in it with you.
Thank you so much, Gugu. Hi, everyone. My name is Samke Mhlongo, and I am a private banker turned wealth coach. And actually, my journey in private banking turned into entrepreneurship and me becoming an advocate for financial literacy when I went through my personal journey of going through a divorce. And I realized how the theory of how personal finance works versus the reality and practicality of how we apply it are two very different things. And so I wanted to have a platform where I merge the two and I share just some of the emotions and the fears and the inputs into how we make decisions around our money plays in our eventual financial outcomes. When last I felt that someone was truly in it with me is actually just a month ago, in the month of May, where I was supposed to release a big project that I've been working on for 2 years, where 2020 was supposed to be the year of harvest actually for a number of years where I had been planting and nurturing the work, and it had to come to an abrupt halt. And a friend of mine who's actually in Nigeria, she was actually an acquaintance before, became a really close friend and ally, and she checked on me every day, phone me every day, text me every day, send me Bible verses, send me motivational quotes. And I thought to myself, why are you doing this for me? You know, we're not that close, number one. Number two, I'm someone who tends to not be able to ask for help simply because I've sort of taken it upon myself to be the pillar of strength and be the face that people can rely on. And so in this time where I needed someone to rely on, I still felt the pressure of putting up appearances that I'm okay and I don't need anyone. And she saw through that. And she literally has been with me every step of the way. And I can truly say, I don't think I'd still be able to get up in the morning and dress up and show up if she hadn't seen through the facade I was trying to put up to say I'm okay, when in fact I wasn't.
Fantastic story, and we're glad that you've got individuals who have been with you through this pivotal time in your life. Someone else, though, who has been in the banking fraternity and transitioned into the world of entrepreneurship and into a very interesting space, especially given the lockdown restrictions, is Tumi Phake. Now, he is the CEO and founder of Zenzele Fitness, a well-known health and gym group that has operated within corporate spaces in South Africa. Tumi, aside from the brief bio that I provided for our viewers here today, give us more insight as to what your journey has entailed thus far, and also when last you truly felt that someone was truly in it with you.
Thanks, Gugu. Just by way of introduction, my name is Tumi Phake. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm the founder and CEO of Zenzele Fitness Group. You know, I've been an entrepreneur for the last 7 years. Before that, I was a former banker in the financial space. And one day I decided to take the leap of faith and become an entrepreneur. It's been an exciting journey. And, you know, thinking about what's happening right now in the world, the last time someone was in it with me was actually about 3 months ago with this COVID crisis, where as a business, we had to maneuver and find ways in which we can diversify and still generate income for our business. And this gentleman, you know, was not only providing, you know, mental, strategic help, but he was just really there to support me through this difficult time. And that's the person who was in it with me this whole time.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing your insight, Tumi, especially how this change in the economic landscape has made you reevaluate your relationship, your relationship with money and your relationship with others. Well, someone who also knows a lot about money and has more than 2 decades of experience within the financial services background is Sindi Mondi from Liberty, to give us some insight into her experience, her interactions with clients as well, and most importantly, what she's been able to witness over the last few years as to how our behaviors and relationship with money has evolved as South Africans. Sindi, I'm looking forward to hearing more of your insight in terms of the key elements that you've identified, what makes 2020 different from 2008, 2009, and maybe even the earlier 90s, where we saw South Africans re-evaluating and recalibrating their relationship with money. But aside from that as well, remind us and give us some insight as to when last you felt that someone was truly in it with you.
Thank you very much, Gugu. My name is Sindi Mondi. As Gugu has mentioned, I represent Liberty. I am an investment specialist with Liberty, with 5 years experience in this field, 7 years in total with Liberty. Gugu, it's been trying times. I was looking forward to 2020 and called it 20 plenty, and I was looking to 20 plenty opportunities to travel, to do and engage in a lot of things, but all that was put to a halt, an abrupt halt by the lockdown. Be that as it may, coming to your second question where you ask when last was I felt that somebody was in it for me, it was 2 colleagues who have become my angels, my living angels, that actually pulled me out of a previous team that I was in to bring me to the investment space. And I thank them every day because it has been just a bliss. And people may be wondering, why is it a bliss when we are going through topsy-turvy, as you've just mentioned? That is what we refer to when we talk about volatility. We are living through that, and it's not going to be any different. It may change in wavelength, but that's what we live with. And those 2 people are still in it with me even today. Thank you, Gugu.
Well, we're looking forward to getting your feedback as well as to how you navigate this topsy-turvy environment. So you've pulled up your digital chair for this week's edition of the Liberty Blue Table Session Conversations. And we want to get straight into it by really deciphering some of the misconceptions and themes that have proven to be quite prevalent when it comes to money and how it influences our relationships with some of our partners and family dynamics. And to me, I want to aim this straight at you, because you have highlighted that you are an entrepreneur, someone who has had the support of mentorship to actually guide you through these stormy and choppy waters for the moment. But let's also touch on the stereotypical elements, right, that accompany a young gentleman like yourself who is an entrepreneur and securing the bag, which has become a very popular phrase with many of our millennials these days. But how has this influenced not only how you're managing the cash flow operations of your business, but your personal balance sheet as well, in terms of making sure that it doesn't emasculate you, if we can put it that way? But how do you approach money, masculinity, and the power play that it might have in terms of your self-identity, even though this is a macroeconomic aspect that has impacted your business?
there's always that saying in business that, how you manage your cash flow in your personal life is a reflection of your cash flow in your business. And I suppose my approach is the same when it comes to managing, personal matters. I have a very strict way of managing, money militantly. But at the same time, I think for me, the masculinity on that is generational wealth. For me to feel like a man is to really create something that will last, even after I'm not around. And so for me, that is, sort of the power play, so to speak, is that, I'm looking for a long-term investment that even when I'm not around, my children's children will still be able to enjoy the benefits of, the investment and the hard work that I've put in. And I think, that's how, for me, I see it as securing it in the bag. It's not really just about, securing the bag now, but is making sure that the bag can even work for you, even when you're not around, it's generating, some real assets that are generating income. And for me, that's securing something in the bag.
We'll come back to Tumi for some more insight, as we know that money often is known to be a power play between genders as well as even races in terms of the lack of inequality that we see in South Africa. And Samke, I'd like to throw this one to you as well. I've been married. I know the power plays that money can play within relationships as well, and the threat sometimes that it can impose on your partner when you become a more financially independent female. And I can imagine that this is something that you've observed from your personal experience and even from the experience of many of your peers in terms of how money just happens to be that trigger that influences the power plays in relationships.
Absolutely, Gugu. I think the first time I interacted with the power play when it comes to money and relationships and your personal life was obviously when I was married, but I think we can extend and expand the conversation beyond that for us to look at how tough economic times, how financial pressures and a decrease in incomes have a direct link in the rise in gender-based violence cases, but also in the many instances where women happily hand over their power when it comes to finances, where women tend to step away from financial decision-making in the household. We know again that around the world, women tend to only step up once they've had either the illness of a spouse, the death of a spouse, or divorce when it comes to when they then take the mantle in the financial decision making. So we need to look at it both ways, where there is power solely resting on the male side, but also where women happily hand over the power that they have.
I'd like us to discuss that a little bit more in detail, Samke. Maybe to start off with you, and I'd be more than happy to hear Cindy's thoughts on this one in terms of how we manage those dynamics, because when we look at society stereotypes, you need to get yourself a man who can look after you. You need a man who's got that power play in terms of the financial standing, but yet as women we're also trying to be more emancipated. We're trying to get ourselves a seat at the table and also transcend into reaching a level of gender pay parity, despite the delays that we've seen in that. But how then do you communicate this to not only your clients, Samke, in your work as a wealth coach, but even from some of your own views that you've observed in terms of the global trends and what might be unique to South Africa? Samke, let's start with you. Cindy, feel free to come in with your feedback after.
Gugu, I think if it was a simple situation we're dealing with, we would have addressed it a number of years ago, because as long ago as the Great Depression of the 1930s, the first studies that linked economic decline, retrenchments with a rise in gender-based violence cases was reported. So this is something that we've been observing and sitting with and trying to tackle for a long time. And I think it speaks to the spaces and the culture that cultivates what eventually culminates in this outburst of violence. I'm led by an African proverb that says, when a coward sees a man that he can win, he becomes hungry for a fight. And that speaks to me around maybe some of the pressures that South African men particularly are under that we may not necessarily understand. And that brings me back again to something that I said last year at a women's event, where I said, it still baffles me how in Women's Month, we have events that tackle patriarchy, that tackle the injustices we see against women without men in the room. We absolutely need to have men in the room when we're having these conversations. And that's why I'm so grateful that Tumi is here with us and has the bravery to engage in this conversation with us, because we need to get a better understanding of the source of the problem. So not only to look at the victims and how we protect ourselves, but how do we stop the perpetrators from actually conducting those crimes? So we need to start having more conversations, non-judgmental conversations with men, and to understand what is it you're going through that perhaps we're not seeing as society? What is it you're going through that perhaps we're not understanding as society, so that we start to shift the needle and move the needle when it comes to addressing not only financial pressures and the financial dynamics in the household, but also overall in society, in our communities, and eventually in our country and our continent.
Quite right there, Samke. And this is certainly a conversation that needs to continue on various platforms and on an ongoing basis. But Sindi, to bring you into the conversation and providing us some feedback as to what Samke has just highlighted, what are your thoughts? What are your observations? And how do you best believe that we need to tackle these emotional elements, but that speak heavily to societal dynamics, as well as our financial interactions with our partners and peers?
Thank you, Gugu. Sometimes we hand over this power to our partners, where we just divorce ourselves in those plans when an advisor is coming to see, or a financial planner is coming to visit you as a couple, and you hand over everything. The challenge with that is that it's a common knowledge that men predecease us as women, and we are now left behind with this burden of still doing what we do naturally in terms of nurturing and rearing up our families, but we don't have finances. We don't have financial information. We don't have financial literacy. So all these dynamics, they are, when you throw them into a mix, and on top of that, lock us up into a room, it's lockdown, we can't go anywhere. And again, there's another economy that's rising of mothers, single-headed households that are run by females. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We're raising a very balanced economy, a very balanced world or country or whatever. These are human beings that are going to be something in the future. But when we look at money, I believe that we need to first look at money as just a currency, something that we use in exchange of something, not something that defines you. And money doesn't change a person. A person changes because of money. That's my view, Hugo.
Sindi, you mentioned something important there that I do want us to deep dive into in just a moment, in terms of how we identify money and how it perhaps reinforces our roles in society. As mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we all introduce ourselves according to the organizations we work for, the organizations we've started, but lockdown has really, in light of the ongoing retrenchments, given people a new sense of identification in terms of, if it's not your job that is your title, if it's not the role you play in someone else's life, then how do you really self-identify? And Tumi, I do want us to pick up and follow up with your thoughts on this conversation. I'm well aware that you don't speak for all men, but as a male representative, I'd be grateful if you could share some insight with us as to how we need to address these views and societal pressures and work in unison as genders as to how we can mitigate the power play dynamics that are often expressed in relationships, much of which is weighted heavily on who has a bigger purse or brings in more pennies into the household.
Thanks, Gugu. That's a very good question. That's a very complex and challenging questions. And, if you look at the social dynamics or the social economic dynamics, and I'll speak for South Africa, and as a Black male, I suppose, with us, looking at our fathers, grandfathers, and in the economy, participating in the economy, a lot of the men, did not participate in the economy. And suddenly there's a shift where now there's a, social liberation where people can participate in the economy. And so it really has provided quite a complex challenge. And I think that, communication in all these variables are quite key. Sometimes, for example, if a man is not the one that, brings the bag or earns the biggest salary, there has to be a communication where the man does feel secure, that he doesn't, feel emasculated because he doesn't earn more money. And as the man themselves, they need to feel secure and understand what role do they play. If you had to play this around, it's the same thing as a man. If I'm the provider and my wife is a housewife, it does not mean that she provides less in the family dynamics. My wife being a provider or a stay-at-home mom, that's the sort of provision that she's bringing to the table. And that also has to be recognized, that just because you're at home does not mean that you don't bring any value to the family dynamics. Sometimes when people are in a relationship, I think they don't really talk about these things, what roles they're going to play and how they add value into the whole picture. And if people understand their roles and they're comfortable with their roles, you will tend to find that there's enough security for people who, you don't feel like you're left out or you're doing less, but you feel like it's not just about monetary contribution, but it's just about contribution emotionally, physically. All kinds of dynamics should be put in the table.
We've really focused extensively on partnerships or marital relationships in terms of the relationship between a man and a woman, and their money dynamics. But of course, our roles as women, as well as individuals in our livelihoods, extends beyond this. It's our relationship with our colleagues and trying to collaborate with them. It's our relationship with our co-workers, whom we might work with as entrepreneurs, and with our family members, some who we might continue to support in terms of advancing their livelihoods, as well as our children. And Sindi, I'd like to start off with you here in terms of what your observations have been as to how we need to redefine and restructure how our money influences the various relationships that we have. In terms of planning adequately, saving adequately, and not using it as a power tool or power play when it comes to our relationships with people that we care about. Sindi?
Thank you, Gugu. As I've already mentioned, that money is just a medium of exchange. And we need to start with our children. Because if I look at ourselves, nobody taught us anything. We are just fumbling away and fumbling along in life as we do. And we are taking out each other's frustration on each other because we don't know how to deal. We don't know how to talk. We don't know the relevant questions to ask. And some of us are even shy to reach out to people like Samke for financial assistance or financial coach, because we think that we are good at what we do. I'm an engineer, I'm the best at it, so why do I need all the help? All that arrogance has to stop. As women, take back your power. Get involved in planning. Get involved in financial matters. Even if you are not working, the role that you play at home has a currency. Try and employ somebody to run around taking children to extramural. Try and employ somebody to drive children to school. That is money that you're saving for your family.
Money is always a sensitive topic, and it can really make or break relationships. And I think one to really understand, how to have a balance within the household. It's people recognizing their roles, and also people realizing that it's not just monetary contribution that is money, but even time. Time spending with your children is money, and there's a sacrifice that needs to be made. And I think that a clear conversation within the household as to what roles people play. It's not even just about the husband and wife. There's black tax where you have to, assist your loved ones, your cousins, your uncles, and all these dynamics that play into place. And really being able to set the boundaries with your loved ones of what you are capable of doing and what you can't do. Setting the expectation, having a proper budget plan, and people understanding how much expenditure in the family. I mean, you look at the dynamics right now during the COVID-19, people's income has obviously been affected, and a clear understanding of what could be spent in the household has to be done for things to work. Because if it's just like a business, if you don't meet the budgets of what you should spend, then you're in trouble. And that is the same thing that applies in relationship. You have to keep it within the budget and how much, spend within your means, and communicate clearly with your loved ones around that.
I bought into fake it until you make it, but then I realized the destructive nature of that. So now you'll hardly see me ever branded, right? Because I rely on the strength of what I'm saying. I rely on the value of what I'm bringing to the table, as opposed to external validation. I come with the internal validation from the value and the track record that I bring. So that is something that I'd like to encourage people to do, to look at and really question the value of what you're bringing to the table. And that has definitely been something that COVID has raised, because it has separated the sheep from the goats, the pretenders from the people that are really walking the talk. And I really do appreciate this time. But just to close off with the reality that, you know, women especially are facing during this time, and I guess the nature of our relations with not only men, but broader society and our communities, I think we need to get used to the idea of not being liked. I could have saved myself so much trouble if I just released the need to be liked. Many things I say are not popular. Many, actions that I advocate for are not popular. Many men have come to tell me to say, Samke, you're cute and I like you, but I just don't think I'd like to be in a relationship with you because of some of these philosophies you have. And guess what? I've made peace with it. I've made peace with the fact that in each generation, there will be someone that is called to be a leader, to push against some of the social injustices we see, and that there is a price to pay for that. And I am okay with paying that price. I'm okay with living the rest of my life being single for my truth. I'd rather be at peace and alone living my truth than keeping up a pretense, because with each decision you take, there's a price to pay. And I'd rather pay the price for truth. So if you're watching this right now, I'd like to encourage you to pay the price for truth rather than the price for suffering or staying in an unhappy marriage or staying in an abusive relationship. If that price is humiliation, or your family telling you, what are you doing? Or your friends thinking, oh, shame, look, she's lost it all. She used to be the it girl. Guess what? It'll be painful, yes, but it's like a rotten tooth. Once you take it out, you will heal, and you will heal and learn to live with that gap in that space, because it will be there, but you'll be a much better person for it. So I do encourage you to take whatever difficult decisions that you have in your life, think carefully about them, think carefully about what's waiting for you on the other end, but also think carefully about the journey you will have to walk to get there, because unfortunately, many women fail on the journey when they realize just how painful it is. Freedom is painful. We've seen it in our country. We've seen it with the Black Lives Matter movement, and never has the oppressor ever come to the aid to relieve the oppressed. So women, we also need to start standing together, banding together, and not being hypocritical and being the upholders of patriarchy in our society, starting with our households.
Oh, Samke, you know that emoji that has those hands up? I think that is what you're truly deserving of, yourself and Sindi, for sharing some of these nuggets with us today, as well as some feedback that it's really about currency, it's about value, but all of it has to stem from truth, because from there, that will decide and be a preempt to the kind of price that you will pay for the freedom that you're looking to solicit. It's definitely not a conversation that we can wrap up here today in terms of the suggestions and the nuggets that we can provide for you, but it is something that we look to build up on in the upcoming weeks and throughout our interactions in our lives. As you've heard from all of our speakers, it's not just about thinking differently about elements and interpreting them differently in terms of our own sense of self-worth and value, but it also calls for action. Unless we as women are more proactive about the role that we serve in our society, and of course walking this journey with our male counterparts, then we'll continue to be left at the back burner. But with that said, we look forward to your interactions and ongoing engagements. We call for your active participation by sharing your feedback and your questions with us, but most importantly, want to encourage you to action and to really drive in the status quo in terms of how money translates into our relationships with ourselves and our loved ones. From myself, Gugulethu Mfuphi, and the team, my guests, Samke Mhlongo, Sindi Mondi, as well as Tumi Phake, a big thank you for your contribution that you've made to the conversation today. Catch us next time on the Liberty Blue Table Sessions.